Hey everybody, Dr. Meg Haworth here. I am going to try to get Tricia on again. We've tried this a few times now, but we're here to talk today about emotional eating and sexual abuse and the connection between the two, because there's definitely that. So we're just waiting for Tricia. I've known her so long. I knew her when. So we're just waiting for her to come on so we can get this conversation going. It's a conversation that she and I have had personally for many years. We've known each other a long time. There we go. I think there's Tricia, so let's invite her on. And we'll see what happens this time. So we just try. There you are.
There I am.
Okay. It worked when we did this vertically. So
yeah, interesting.
Technology. So, hi.
Hey, beautiful.
Hi. You other beautiful, intelligent, amazing woman. I'm so excited to have you have this conversation with me today.
Thank you.
I was just saying how you and I have known each other for so long. Well, we arrived in LA right around the same time in 2005.
From the East Coast.
Yeah, from the East Coast. You from Boston, right?
Yep, but I was in New Jersey at the time, actually.
Oh, okay. And actually, I was coming from Florida, even though I'm from
Okay.
So, yeah. So anyway, so here we are. So today's conversation is sex abuse and emotional eating. And it's a big conversation. I think a lot of people don't even realize that those two things are indelibly connected. And you know personally, and that's a big reason why I wanted to have you on here, is not just that you're the expert and you know what you're talking about, and because you've worked with thousands of people, but you've been through it, and that's the intimate conversation I wanted to have with you today is your journey of going through sexual abuse and emotional eating. And maybe when was the moment that you figured out those two things were tied, and what was the thing that you did to do it differently, or was there a moment?
Well, it's so interesting. I was in therapy with an eating disorders therapist like many moons ago. It was 30 years ago, in fact. And I had an eating disorders therapist, and I had, as so many people do, I had suppressed, not my memory. I mean, I knew it happened. It wasn't like a surprise to me when it came up, but I had just not dealt with it and had no way to deal with it, So when I was in therapy, I basically was in therapy for a good long time, and, not getting a whole lot of progress. We weren't really getting anywhere. And at some point, I mean, maybe it was not so far in, like maybe a couple months in or so, I just mentioned in an offhand way, like, for God's sakes, I had this incestuous relationship, and I just sort of dropped it. And boy, was it a bomb. Like, my therapist was like, she almost leapt out of her chair, like, what? Like, hello, like pertinent information here. So, like, it wasn't in my intake form or anything like that. I just hadn't thought about it, and so I didn't make the connection until that point. I mean, I don't know if I made the connection directly at that point, but at least I started talking about it in therapy, and that's sort of when things started to unfold. I don't think I still made the connection, though, between my eating and that issue. I mean, I had a lot of issues as an emotional eater. I had a lot of issues. So it was more just in my evolution of healing that it became more and more, I had more and more awareness of the fact that there was a connection, and that just everything that I had buried with food needed to be addressed. So it wasn't just that, it was my whole family dynamic and all these different things that I had really not given much credence to. I mean, I grew up in a fairly good home. My parents were very loving, and I was well provided for. So it was hard to take a look at my past and see that there was anything wrong that needed to be looked at. But but anyway, that was sort of the beginning as that therapy session. That's when I started addressing the sexual abuse. And then from there, just it evolved into, just awareness that whatever experiences in my past I've suppressed, they have to be dealt with, or else I'm never going to overcome my eating issue.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really important message for people today, that, we're helping to cut the corners for people on making this connection between the things that we're doing now unconsciously to try to mask the pain. So, there's sex and alcohol and drugs and, all these seemingly fun things that we're doing to push it down. And food was the thing that, now at one point, how heavy were you at one point?
I was 50 pounds overweight. That's about the heaviest I got, was 50 pounds, which was a lot. It was awful. I hated being fat. I hated being fat my entire life. And I was fat my entire childhood. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I look back and there are times when I wasn't fat, but in my head, I call it fat head. I was fat the whole time. And when I hit adolescence, puberty, that's when I got really fat. And of course, that's very typical for people with sexual abuse is, as soon as the sexuality starts emerging, in our development, we just tamp it down with food because it's so freaky, to have such strong sexual feelings. And that's no question what I did. I mean, I was so fat and my face was like as round as a pumpkin. And I my whole, I guess middle school years, I was really overweight, and into high school too. And it was awful. I hated being fat, but there's no question in my mind. I was trying to control my sexuality because, I didn't know what to do with all the feelings that I had.
So what, were you pushing sexuality away or were you just so confused?
I think that, here's the thing. I was sexual at a very inappropriate age, okay? As so many are. Like at age 5, I was sexual. I was taught how to masturbate at age 5, and I was sexually engaging with this person when I was that young. So I believe that, when somebody is that is sexual, like their sexuality is, stoked at such a young, inappropriate age, inappropriate to their developmental, phases. It just was too soon, right? What happened is I became hypersexual, which is common. And so I compulsively masturbated my whole childhood, which brought me so much shame. I cannot even tell you, because I didn't know anybody else on the planet was doing such a thing. And so I had so much shame about my sexuality. So I believe that fast forward to age 12, 13, 14 or so, when I was developing, I believe that I was totally unaware because I was eating so much, but I probably had such a stronger sense of sexuality just because that's what happens when you develop, and I believe that at a subconscious level, it just was overwhelming to my being, and for me to be sexual is to be bad.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's really also what I was burying, is the shame and the guilt that just was an automatic, thing regarding sexuality. If I was sexual, if I was, yeah, I mean, if I had sexuality, it meant I was just bad. So I couldn't allow myself to be sexual. And that's where alcohol came in at age 13 or 14. I started to drink. And again, alcohol just tamped that down. And it tamped it down in one hand, but the other hand, it enabled my sexuality, but without my participation. Like if I could be drunk and promiscuous, which I was, I didn't have to take responsibility for my sexuality because I couldn't. Like I could not bear to be a sexual being because I had so much shame around it.
Right. Sexuality out of control is another
totally
thing a lot of abuse survivors go through. And you're right. It's like it's a very interesting thing, because when you're a child and you go through this experience, and if you have a somatic response, a sexual response to something that's so, it's such a violation of you as a being. But if you're having some kind of a physiological response to it, you start to associate that physiological response with abuse. So that makes it so much harder for you to understand or to get into the pleasure of sexuality. And
Yeah.
Somebody who didn't go through that doesn't have to war with that kind of guilt and that shame, and
Totally. And that's probably the biggest sin of it all. The biggest, dark stain on sexual abuse, I think, is how hard it is to make peace with one's sexuality and make it a good thing when it's been so bad and so dark for so long.
Yeah, exactly. So we just look for all kinds of ways to avoid it. And so for you, emotional eating was avoidance. So now, though you're an expert in this field, you've helped probably at this point hundreds of thousands of people. I know you've got a lot of people in your community that you're helping with emotional eating. So can you give some maybe some tips or some ideas of what people can do if they're in that moment, if you're in the moment right now where you're connecting your sexual abuse history and your emotional eating issues now, what would you tell that person now to do now?
Well, it's really amazing how much we do deny of this situation. It's really news to people that their fat, their excess weight is a shield. It's a form of protection. And it certainly was for me, the idea that I could somehow keep the world from, violating my space if I were fat. If I had rolls of fat on my body, I wouldn't be attractive. I wouldn't be desired. I wouldn't be bothered, And at the same time, if I had rolls of fat on my body, I wouldn't feel my sexuality, which was just as much a part of it. I wouldn't be in touch with my own sexuality, and therefore I wouldn't, have all those conflicting feelings of guilt and shame. So, I think it's so important, that people take this journey to get to know themselves. People are always slapping on diets on this weight issue, and it's absurd, frankly. It's completely absurd to think a diet is going to heal me, because my problem was not food. I was 50 pounds overweight out of terror of feeling, terror of feeling my feelings. So to go on a diet, all that does is just take away my protection and give me no tools for dealing with life without my protection. So people are, of course, 98% of all diets fail, because weight is a symptom of something much deeper, not of overeating. Of course it's a symptom of overeating, but it's really a symptom of what's eating me. And if I don't address that, there is no point on going on a diet. There's just no point. If somebody struggles chronically with their weight, they're struggling with deeper issues that must be addressed, or else it's hopeless, and they might as well just enjoy their food. Don't even bother to enjoy your food. Give yourself a break. Don't keep trying to diet. Just enjoy your food until you're ready to go on that journey of self-exploration, because that's what it takes. And it doesn't have to be so hard and scary. It's like that's the idea is it's going to be so hard, I'm going to die, right?
Right.
But
I heard it's that going down that deep, and all people think they have to go back and relive the experience, and I can tell you in transpersonal psychology, it's not about that at all. You don't get emotionally dropped into it. It's more of a looking at it from a higher perspective, which helps you create a whole different relationship with you and with healing. And I think that's key right there. You don't have to relive the experience and go through that. So
but the thing is, it's what somebody does need to do is embrace the journey. Like this life is not about cash and prizes. It's about healing. We're here to heal so that we can be better conduits for God's grace, you know? And so if somebody can realize that the things that happen to us as a kid, and I see Mike's comment there about emotional, every form of abuse, every form of experience is an opportunity for us to grow and to grow out of, you know, that trauma and make something good from it. And it can be that. I mean, I don't really find myself ever regretting what happened as a kid, because it made me who I am today, and I'm more
Mm-hmm.
and all that goes. And so I kind of see it as a, you know, silver lining. I'm not glad it happened, but I'm also not regretful because of the person I am, and it's forced me to become. So if we can kind of see it from a more philosophical and you know, really spiritual perspective, and embrace the things that have happened to us, nobody is unscathed in this lifetime. Like, nobody's unscathed. We all have experienced shit, you know. and so if we can embrace it as, hey, this is my cross to bear, and I'm here to address it and heal from it and move on from it. And I mean, we will be 100 times better than we were if it had never happened, because it will drive us to find, you know, to really search within ourselves for resources that we didn't know were there, you know. So that's my biggest form of advice is, you know, don't see it as a curse, but an opportunity for healing, and then embrace that healing journey.
Yeah. And healing is really a process of getting well. It's not something that it's an ongoing process, and I know you and I are still in that process, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know,
no, there's no there.
Liberate. Yeah.
You never get there.
Exactly.
There's no there.
Right.
We're always in a process of becoming.
Exactly. But it doesn't have to be, it is difficult at times, but it's not like you're living in an arduous, difficult experience when you're in the process of healing. I found that it was arduous and difficult to live in the horrific not doing.
Totally.
That was hell for me.
Yeah, totally. Amen.
So where you're saying that everything's fine, everything's great, but you're really just falling apart inside, you know. And I think
I was going to say, I mean, regarding the weight issue, if somebody's eating for self-protection and to bury those feelings, that gets really hard. I mean, that's hard, you know, carrying around 50, 100, 200 extra pounds. I mean, that's a life-altering. Can address this stuff and break free from those chains that bind them, because living as an obese person is incredibly painful, and in every possible way.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's terrible. So, carrying around the weight of the emotions, I think, is and the beliefs that are associated with it is just such a huge burden. So, anybody listening today, I really encourage you to take care of yourself, to go on the journey, to join Tricia's community. She's so fantastic. Please let people know where they can get your information. You've got so much great information to help people get through their emotional eating. So
thank you. Yeah, if they go to my website, which is healyourhunger.com, healyourhunger.com, maybe we could type that in here. Then they'll, I definitely recommend that they fill out the quiz. And the quiz will help them understand if they're an emotional eater or a food addict. And I love people to start there by taking that quiz, because it's really a spectrum of, you know, whether, like, how far you've taken it, whether you're an emotional eater or a food addict, and then there's there's help available based on your score, your personalized score. So I definitely recommend people start there, and then I have a program that's very powerful. It's a 10-week program to freedom from emotional eating, and it really does take people on a beautiful journey of addressing and healing emotional eating.
Okay, great. And I see now, I wasn't able to see the comments before, but as soon as I put something into the chat,
cool.
Mike's comment, you started to address it, but it was about growing up with an emotionally abusive mother. And
well, yeah, it's basic. It's the same. Whatever your trauma is, whatever abuse you experience, it's the same process. You know.
Yeah, it may be dealing with different aspects of your being. So, sex abuse, obviously, you deal very deeply with sexuality and struggling with that.
Mm-hmm.
Emotional abuse, you can deal very deeply with insecurities and your own personal power and confidence, and you have to learn how to build those things within you. So,
yeah,
but you're right. It's the byproducts and the things that we use to numb these experiences and the ways we try to avoid them, which just makes everything worse, it's pretty much the same,
Yeah. It's just these things that we need to deal with. But your work is so important, Meg, in this world, and helping do your work and darkness. It's just so.
Yeah, thank you. It's you're cutting out a little bit on this, but thank you. I appreciate that. And
Sorry, I was just, let me change places. I was just bragging about how awesome you are and how great your work is.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I wanted to mention to people too, because Tricia and I are so aligned in what we're doing and how we can team up to help people in the different ways that we do it. And so if you go to my website, which is meghaworth.com, MEGWRTH.com, you can download the ACE quiz from the ACE study, and then you can also download my 10 steps to overcoming the effects of victimization. And we can combine that with Tricia's work and get into her community and listen and learn about emotional eating. She's got tons of tips and lots of value. She's been doing this a really long time and has worked with thousands of people. So I think, together we can, create a real great power team for people that are trying
Absolutely.
Emotional eating and sexual abuse and all of that. So
you bet.
Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you. Love you. Thanks for having me.
So fantastic. I think we don't have any other questions here in the thread, but if anybody who's watching this later on, please feel free to put any questions you have for us in the chat thread. We're going to be sharing it to our communities, and we're also going to be looking back and seeing, what comments you might have, what suggestions or thoughts or questions you might have, to see if we can help you as you take the next step in your journey. And I think that's probably, from everything that we've talked about today, that's probably the most important message, is that if you're making this connection now between emotional eating and sexual abuse and this history you have, or any kind of abuse that you went through, is to take the next steps, to do the inner work that it's necessary, because diets aren't going to work. I don't think anything works without personal development.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, if you really want to get great at whatever it is you came here to do, you have to develop yourself personally, whether you're a triathlete or a business owner or,
yeah, for sure.
So anyway, so just let us know how we can help you. You can private message me. You can private message Tricia. And thanks so much for listening, you guys. You're awesome. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Love you, hon. I'll talk to you.
Love you too. Thanks for having me.
Bye.